So Bruce Kettlitz, where do you start? Both Al Moander and I'm Dennis Chamberlain, consider him to be perhaps the most memorable character in our entire lives, and that's saying a whole lot. And he was a music animal, and I know from playing in a multitude of bands that for a band to really work, you have to have at least one complete music animal that cares about nothing else in life except music. And when music starts, it just rivets through, in Bruce's case, rivets through his body, and nothing else matters. It takes complete control of him, and it allows him to just explode. But, what do you think, Al, as far as starting out with Bruce?
A good way to say, a good way to summarize it. And I've used this line, 3 times this weekend, that in my life, I've come across only two people in my lifetime that I've said, someone needs to write a book about this individual.
Yeah.
Well, and one of those people is Bruce Kettlitz.
Yeah.
And it's for so many reasons. His life story, his evolution. When I first met him in junior high band, it was exactly that. I mean, the poor band director, Mr. Selman, had to try and herd all the cats, but that one particular cat was a wild cat, and to try and keep him going in a direction. It was obviously he was a great drummer, and that eventually led to some very good things for him, because he studied drums and he knew how he could read the music that Selman would give to him. So he's reading drum music and following the beats there. Later on, that became really, really important, because he eventually needed to become a member of the Army band. And his ability to read music and play according to the book was important. The music didn't take him over there. The military took him over.
Yeah.
But going through high school and his introduction into rock and roll, and that was the beginning of all of it. And pretty much his entire life, even though he told me one time he made a terrible mistake by stopping drumming when he turned 50 years old. He thought, 50 years old, I can't go out there and play drums anymore like I used to play drums.
Yeah.
And 15, 20 years later, he says, I made a big mistake there, because he was looking at all of the longevity of the bands like the Rolling Stones and the ones that were still out there playing that music. He says, I made a mistake. I quit.
And one of the things that really we haven't visited about in a long time was Bruce's drumming expertise. We were a tight band, especially for that age. And that tightness was something that was really important to us. And some of the bands really didn't have that. And for the most part, it was because of Bruce and his drumming. We'll get into his voice, which was a tremendous part of the Gallows, our band, and his career. But his drumming expertise, and because he was so strong and so intense, it was very good, and he had that tightness. But you can't start out too much about Bruce without talking about his parents. And to think this was a preacher's kid,
Presbyterian minister,
and Reverend Kettlitz was a strong, intimidating person. Bruce's mom was the sweetest person you could imagine, and Reverend Kettlitz was just an intimidating person. His voice and everything else about him was just very, very intimidating. And to grow up like that, I don't know what to say, but they loved Bruce. Oh, they loved him.
Oh, yeah.
They loved him so much.
Sacrificed a lot.
They did. Imagine being the minister of one of the most prestigious churches in Keokuk. Mm-hmm. And having this wild son who got into all kinds of trouble. But I'll tell you what, they loved him, and they did everything for him that they could.
Always stood beside him and behind him throughout his entire life.
Yeah.
He owed them a tremendous, tremendous amount from his youth. because what he cost them emotionally and financially was huge. And it was I'm so thankful that in his later life, before they passed, he was able to go back and be close to them, and not so much pay them back financially or take care of them, but the idea that he went back, and Bruce's nature was not to take care of someone, but to be taken care of.
Absolutely.
And so when he went back down there, his mother came back to life because she was cooking 2 meals a day for Bruce and making sure he was there for lunch and for dinner, and he was working at the time in a radio station in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and but he was close by. She knew he was close by, and so did Reverend Kettlitz, and that helped to pay him back for all the traumatic years.
Point. Important point. Well, now back to the gallows. So once we got going, back then it was kind of like you envision a band and you practice, and it's like, oh well, okay, who's going to be the singer? Well, okay, well, we'll figure that out later. And for a short while, we didn't realize what we had in the voice of Bruce Kettlitz. And after several months, it started becoming clear that he had this strong,
gravelly,
but Motown, blues, R&B, soul voice. So the soul voice that was part of the music scene back then. It was so much the Beatles and the Stones, and we did some of that, and that was fine. But it was really when the Young Rascals came around that we realized, and everybody realized, Bruce sounded just like Felix Cavalieri, the lead singer for the Young Rascals. And the only problem with that was I was the band leader only kind of by default. I was the oldest, and I had the most money and everything. But anyway.
You were living at the Y, and you had the most. Okay.
That's part of the reason I did.
That's right.
But the thing was, my love was more, very frankly, was more the Beatles and the Stones and folk music, to be honest. And the songs that I wanted to write and felt inspired to write were more along that genre. And yet here the band was making this turn towards soul music. And I liked soul music. My heart wasn't in it, but it was too much for me to not go along with. And the other members of the band loved that kind of music too, in addition to Bruce. And we had this guy with this voice. I mean, what can you do? And so it's interesting. Later on, when we were breaking up, I wanted to do a record to leave behind when the Gallows disbanded. And so the song that I wrote really didn't fit Bruce's voice at all. It was kind of a sorrowful folk song kind of thing. It was really looking back, Remember Mary was a song in search of a genre. It didn't fit anywhere, and it didn't fit Bruce's voice, but he loved the song anyway, and it wasn't his kind of thing, but he did it, and it's kind of it's a mismatch in an interesting way, his voice singing that song.
Yep. I can remember the period that he went through where he was a drummer, and he's a damn good drummer, and he knew that, and yeah, he could sing a song or so. But then he discovered himself, and he discovered his voice. I can remember when he first started getting into that and finding out what he could do with his powerful voice. And that was a revelation. And there were songs, I'm thinking Mustang Sally, Rascals, and all of a sudden he was able to go in and mimic Felix and lived very comfortable in that space.
Absolutely, he fit it perfectly. Wilson Pickett, another example, and so forth. And so the band took that turn, and I don't recall whether even continued to do any Beatles, Stones, Beach Boys, whatever, that sort of stuff, because we became more of a soul music band. We always admired the Rockers, and they were the epitome of the soul band. You talk about a tight band. And so we were kind of that was a lot of inspiration for us. But I think one of the things about back to Bruce and his parents, and it was that they really liked me, and I liked them, and I think they liked me because they thought, well, Bruce is headed the direction of music, and it could be a lot worse than having Dennis Chamberlain
Yeah.
be in charge.
Yeah, you were straight arrow.
I was.
You
I
were.
really was. Much more than I
They-
am now, I'll tell
they
you. But
appreciated that.
yeah, they did, and I really liked them a lot. And so what happened was they were going to go on a month-long vacation, and they thought, what better idea than to have Dennis move in with Bruce and cook for him, take care of him, make sure he doesn't get in any trouble. And what could possibly go wrong?
Yes, that's
So where do we start?
perfectly said. What
It
could
was
possibly go
it was
wrong?
a job I was so unqualified for. I was way over my head. I had no idea what I was getting into. But the climax of all of that was the party, and there was a big party going on, and I didn't seem to have enough control to keep from letting Bruce have this big party going on. I remember going to bed, and the party was still going on, and so we can both talk about this. But the next morning, now I had gone to work. I worked at the Pepsi Cola bottling company, or the factory, or the warehouse out of Main Street. I was gone, and so what happened?
Parties back then and parties today are spontaneous, can be spontaneous, and the best ones usually just crop up from nowhere. And that's what happened on that Saturday night at Bruce's house.
Yes, you're right.
It just came from nowhere, and it started to grow. And word of mouth, we may have not had social media and cell phones, but word of mouth on Main Street circulated real fast. And all of a sudden, there was a hell of a party on Grand Avenue at Bruce's house.
Yeah.
And Bruce was not one to, he was fanning the fires, if nothing else. To have more people there. He was having a great time with it. But the party eventually died out until the next morning when Mrs. McCoy was driving to church and went past the manse and looked up and said, "Oh my God, there's a window open on the second story. Well, if it rains, that'll be terrible." So she went in and looked around, and lo and behold, there's beer cans, there's pizza boxes, it was a mess. And she saw somebody laying on the sofa with long, long hair. Oh my God, there's a girl in the house.
Yes.
So you can pick up the story better from there.
Well, she runs out in a panic and calls Dr. Fogelsong. And Dr. Fogelsong comes over. I'm hearing this later when Dr. Fogelsong calls me. He runs over, and the first thing happens when he gets in the door was that Doug Clark is asleep on the sofa. Well, he's got long hair, and Mr. Fogelsong realized, oh, this isn't so bad after all. It's just a long-haired guy. But he thought, as long as I'm here, I better check some of the other rooms. Well, sure enough, he goes up to one of the other rooms, and there's a guy and a girl asleep in bed. And I guess he roused them out of bed. But all I know is he goes out of the house, and he calls me, and I'm at work. And he tells me, he said, "Dennis, with friends like this, Bruce doesn't need enemies." I'll never forget that line. I didn't know how I fit into that. But we talked, and he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I think you've learned your lesson. You can control this, so I'm not going to tell the Kettlitzes." And I thought, oh, thank God. So the Kettlitzes, then they came home. They were due to come home for an interim visit. Came home like a day or two after that, in the middle of this month-long trip. And we visited, and I remember Mrs. Kettlitz was upset that I hadn't cooked much of the food out of the refrigerator. I mean, there were steaks, there were all kinds of things, and they were rotting now because I hadn't even opened the refrigerator. But at any rate, despite that, everything seemed fine. And then finally, they were set to go back out of town on their trip, and we're heading for, I think, Nauvoo for a gig. And they're leaving, and they go, "Oh, we dodged a bullet. Everything's fine." And we're almost over the bridge, and we see these flashing lights behind us.
Car lights coming up.
Yes,
blinking, flashing, and pull over.
We did. We get up there and pull over, and Bruce gets out of the car and goes back and Alice, I remember you're looking up at the rearview
mirror.
mirror and you're saying, "Oh my God, they're just pointing like this and they're yelling and everything." And finally, Bruce finally comes back and sits in with a sigh. He says, "Well, I guess I fucked up."
I guess you did.
And they, to their credit, they let us play the gig that night. And when we came back that night, I'll never forget. I mean, you can imagine how I felt. I was supposed to be the one taking care of them.
You were the big
And I sat down, exactly. And yet these two, I mean, Reverend and Mrs. Kettlitz, they sat me down and they said, you know, we gave you a job that was something no one should have been trying to even do. And we're canceling the rest of the trip. We're staying here, but we want you to stay with us, not only for the rest of the 2 weeks, but until you move down to Dallas in September, and which I did. And that is the kind of people they were.
Anyone who was around Bruce very much, at one time or another, wanted to kill him.
That's true.
And his parents sometimes, yes. But my big experience was that as we were playing at the fairgrounds in Memphis, Missouri.
Oh, yes.
And we got down there, and none of us had time to eat. We had to do the equipment setup, and we were working with that and say, let's send somebody on a hamburger run. And so Jack Donahue was there. I knew Jack. I trusted Jack. And so I had the car. I threw him the keys, go to town, pick up hamburgers, and bring them back out here to eat. Well, somewhere between the building where we were setting up the equipment and where my car was parked, Jack decided it was a good idea to let Bruce drive. Bruce had never driven a car before in his life, let alone a stick shift. And here I am, and my 53 Chevy was nothing to brag about, but it was the only car I had, and that was our big it hauled equipment. It was, you know, everything that we needed at that time as a 16, 17-year-old kid. Yeah. And but Bruce got behind the wheel of that, and yes, there were roads down there, but Bruce's mindset was, who needs a road? I mean, look at all that green grass that's out there. And they took out across that field. How he got it in gears, started, stopped, I don't know. But they took out across the field, and little did he know, but there was about a 2-foot deep drainage ditch that went across. And he had no concept on what he might be looking at or what might happen. He hit that thing, and it loaded the entire grill with mud. It packed the springs and the front suspension with mud. And he thought, well, so they got to town and they got back, but they thought, well, I don't think his damage too bad, so, you know, it'll be okay. I'll never notice. Well, the evening went by, and we drove back, and we wanted to stop at Midway in Alexandria, Missouri, and we stopped in a parking lot, went in, and finally had sat down and had something to eat. Yeah. And we came back out, and I looked, and I thought, what the hell? And my car was sitting in a huge pool of gasoline because he had ruptured the fuel tank.
I remember it well.
And you can't even imagine the work that it took. After that, the car, I could try and get it up to 25 or 30 miles an hour, and all it was is the wheel was going like this the entire time. He had completely thrown everything out of alignment. I eventually got underneath it, and I saw all the mud, and the story came out. What in the hell did you do? Well, we had a little mishap. Yeah, you did. Yeah. But that was, I could have killed him.
I remember it well. That night, I remember how irritated you were, and rightfully so. And it was a good gig, though. I remember it was at the Memphis Fair. Only one I remember at the Memphis Fairgrounds that we played. But anyhow, well, I have to recite the story about Bruce and the microphone, because Bruce was not a technical person. It was amazing to us that he could even put his drum set together. It was just so far down on his list, anything mechanical or anything like that. But his responsibilities at each year were to put his drum set together. And since he became the lead singer of the band, of course, obviously he had a microphone and was a singer. So we always said, okay, Bruce, you're going to set up your microphone on your stand with your cord, and that's all you got to do. We'll take it to West Wrist.
The way you want it.
The way, exactly, sure. Well, so there was one gig, I don't remember why, but he was running late to the gig, and we knew he was going to be late, and it was going to be a last minute thing when he showed up. So we decided, or I decided, well, I'll at least go ahead and set up his microphone. So I take the microphone out of the bag. And this microphone, first of all, I mean, you got to understand, Bruce sings with so much power and so much intensity that I shouldn't have been surprised when I took that microphone out of the bag. But the microphone was covered with this much solid dried phlegm.
And pizza and cheeseburgers.
I suppose.
Yeah, okay.
But the fact that he could even be heard through this microphone is a testament to how strong his voice was. And I just remember seeing that and then calling you guys, and you guys, you got to come over and see this. And Al, I don't know who took the responsibility of chiseling it off of there.
I don't know either. I mean, you don't just take a microphone, dip it down water. And
no, that's the problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody had to physically do some brushing and scraping in order to try and open up the microphone.
Yeah, I mean, the Kettlitz, he never would have noticed such a thing. So, to even notice that this thing was covered with all this was just kind of beyond him.
Bruce was the antithesis of mechanical aptitude. If there was nothing that he could look at, and there was no logic for him to be able to say, this is part A and it goes in part B. That was never going to work.
Exactly.
That was not going to work.
Okay, so then later, we did the record because I was leaving to go down to college in Texas, and there are a couple of other things involving Bruce that happened. But I think if we could jump right to the little him getting in trouble with the law and what happened after that, because I think this is really another very intriguing part of the life of Bruce Kettlitz.
Summer of '68, you guys had already, you were gone,
right?
And so we formed a new band. Doug, Bruce, myself, and we picked up a couple guys from Carthage, Illinois. Slink Rand, which was a name to be reckoned with eventually, and Jules Patton, a keyboard player, harmonica player, pretty good singer. And we formed another band called Bonaparte Citric Store. And that was all well and good, but in the summer of '68, the drugs really started to rear their ugly head in Keokuk. They were available. There was Bruce and one of the friends of the band that I won't mention found out the wonders of speed, and they were popping speed like crazy, and they'd stay up for an entire weekend. And they were smoking dope. Marijuana had found its way to town, and I kind of stood back and I said, I've got to get away from this because I see where it's going to go. And so my grades in college was not going to keep me out of the draft. So I knew I've got to have some control of this. So I enlisted in the Navy in August. I was gone. By December, my premonition came true because I received word that Bruce had been arrested for possession in Macomb. That immediately, he went through the process, and back then they used to want to hang you for possession of marijuana. You were in trouble. And so Bruce had to go, and he spent, I believe it was 6 months in prison in Illinois, Mount Sterling. I'm not sure exactly where it was at, but during that 6 months, Bruce's parents were trying to get him out.
I even remember one conversation, a phone conversation they had with me down in Dallas, and I didn't know about this at first, and I called up and I said, well, how's Bruce? And Reverend Kettlitz said, well, he's in the clink. And, and that was how they described it. So anyway, so what happens next?
Eventually the Kettlitzes did find their right judge someplace that said, look, what can you do to get him out? He said, okay, what we will do is that we will let him out under strict conditions that he will enlist immediately into the Army. And that was their only recourse. And they thought, okay, that's what's going to happen. So he got out of prison. He went into the Army. He went through boot camp. He survived that, which was amazing in itself.
And let me interject one boot camp story, and that is that coincidentally, I ended up in boot camp a month or two behind Bruce because I'd enlisted in the reserves and was going through boot camp. This was Fort Polk, Louisiana, And somehow or other, I heard that Bruce was there in this huge Fort Hope, and he heard that I was there. And I don't know, so I just remember somehow we were trying to connect. And one night, I'm standing in total darkness, waiting in a line to make a phone call at the phone booth to call back home. And I hear some voice off in the distance, an unmistakable voice. And what can you say about Bruce? Yeah. He says, "Hey, does anyone here know Dennis Chamberlain?" Of course, no one knew Dennis Chamberlain, but I ran over there, and in the darkness, here we are talking, and hadn't seen each other
destiny there
for a couple of years at that point. And it was just truly amazing. We had a great visit, and for a long time after that, I didn't see him, as you will explain why.
Out of boot camp, there were some choices to be made, and he applied for the Army band. And this is where it goes back to when he was in junior high, and he studied music, and he learned to read drum music, and he could play whatever they put in front of him. That was a big part. Plus, he was a good drummer on top of it. He was applied for, and he was accepted into the Army band, and he was doing that someplace out east. I don't know how close it was to Washington, right? But someplace out east. And that lasted for a year, basically. And then he got orders, and his orders were to go to Germany. And fine, I'm going to Germany, and and enjoy that. And he was still playing in the Army band, and it was wonderful. But it wasn't much longer that he got orders to Vietnam. And he said, that's not happening, because there weren't any Army bands in Vietnam. And so, no. And while he was in Germany, he had made friends with other musicians outside the Army, and one of them was from Holland. And they got to be good friends. And Bruce says, I'm not going. I'm not going. And they made arrangements for Bruce to go AWOL. Now, this is my understanding and my recollection of this, and I think it's reasonably accurate.
Sure.
This turns out that this guy from Holland, they got him into Rotterdam, Holland. And this is where Bruce met Helia. And Helia eventually became his wife, but it was the sister of this guy that helped him. While they were playing in the band over there, he joined the band, and of course everything had to be underground. There was no passport, there was nothing legal about him. And they started playing over there, and they started gaining some notoriety.
Ready Kilowatt, right?
Ready Kilowatt was then. Guess where that name came from? At the Keokuk Lock and Dam.
How about that? That's pretty cool.
Yep. So Ready Kilowatt was doing, and you can still look them up on YouTube today and hear and see their music from back then, and they have videos. And they were doing quite well, but in Germany, that meant you had to travel, and when you traveled, you had to cross borders, and when you crossed borders, you had to have a passport. He didn't. So he spent quite a bit of time being smuggled with the equipment and stuff across the borders, to get from gig to gig. And that lasted for a while, but it wasn't going to work out. Yeah. Well, Nixon then came out with the amnesty program, where he was accepting these people back into the country as long as they did a term of community service. And so Bruce was assigned to come back and go to the mental health institution in Independence, Iowa. Yep. He was up there for a year and a half. And I tell people, this was clearly a case of the blind leading the blind, because he had no more. I mean, he was an orderly, and he had to contain people and work with people, but he was working with people that were more sane than he was, I'll guarantee. And so he was up there for a year and a half, but then he was out. He had a dishonorable discharge from the Army.
Okay.
He didn't have to do any prison time, but he was able to get a passport and go back to Europe. And when he did that, he picked up with the band again, and they started playing. And they traveled over there. They played in conjunction with groups like Golden Earring, who had an international pop song. There was a very popular singer over there by the name of Herman Brood. Yep. That they traveled through Europe with.
Radar Love.
And they did really well over there. And at one time they released an album, and it was my understanding that album reached like a top 10 or a top 20 status in Europe on that album. And so that was wonderful. But the problem was the drugs crept back in. And they started the whole band. Everybody was doing some, and eventually it just all imploded and fell in on itself. So Bruce was kind of a lost soul at that time, and he came back to the United States, but he couldn't go back to Mountain Home. That wasn't going to work with his parents and the lifestyle and everything. And he came back, and he was on the West Coast for a while. This is where you saw the picture of him sitting on the bumper of the car with Dylan, because Jill came back over here with him too.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Helia.
Yeah.
And so they were back here at that time, living in the San Francisco area. He picked up and played with a pretty well-known band out there for a short period of time too. He was a drummer out there for, and the name escapes me right now, but it still wasn't getting him away from his core problems. And he eventually had to admit where he was at and what was going on, and try and get his life back under some sort of control. He knew that, and I had been in communication on and off, and we got talking, and I made a tough decision. I told him, I said, Bruce, you can come here, and you can live with us for a while. And I had 2 young girls at the time, probably 8 and 12 years old, and I said, here are the rules. I said, you break the rules once and you're gone. It's just that fast. It's your decision. Mm-hmm. He came and lived with us and really got along really well. He was able to get his feet back on the ground. They stayed away from the drugs completely, and I didn't really let him drink or anything else. I just couldn't. I couldn't afford to do that. So he was here, and Steve Ryder, another good friend of ours, got him working, got him in a job where he had some income, and his life was getting really pretty much back on track if he could have just stayed away from the hormones for a while, because he fell in love, and you can tell that story better than I. But he ended up losing his job, and things didn't work out with his newfound love.
Well, he came down to Dallas for a while, and frankly, I don't remember why that would be. And he stayed with me for a short time, and I used bad judgment in introducing him to a female coworker that I knew, and it was, Bruce, it's a all one-track mind. So that's what happened there.
So eventually, he after that, he had himself straightened out enough that he went back down to Mountain Home, and his parents welcomed him.
Where he stayed the rest of his life.
Yep. He started to work. He had to have something to do with music, and so he found a local radio station down there that he started doing a radio show down there, playing music, because he had a just vast knowledge of it. And then the radio station, that's you can barely get by doing that, as for a few hours, a couple hours a day. He ended up, they had a sales position open up, and he went into sales for that radio station in the Mountain Home. Yep. And he actually, Bruce you could converse with him. That was not a problem. He could talk with people. And he ended up then staying with that job for quite some time. He really did. Yeah. His parents, when he got well enough along, he bought a home that was probably 2 blocks away from his parents' condominium, and he lived there by himself. He collected books like crazy. He had an incredible collection of books.
Yeah, and comic books, though, was the main thing, right?
What they called the pulp fiction books, not so much comic books, but it was the mystery novels and the black. Okay. The what do they call them? Noir novels. They were dime novels, and he collected these things and took immaculate care of them, and had a incredible collection of them that was eventually quite valuable to him in his later years. And so he actually had 2 houses down there, an older house that he completely filled with the books, and his parents then finally swung a deal. He sold the old house and he moved to a larger home, more of a ranch style thing, and he lived there by himself, and every room was filled with volumes of books. He had some first edition books, and when you get a hold of a first edition Walt Whitman or something, you got something. Mm-hmm. And so he had several of those that were worth a lot of money. And thankfully, in his, it was actually Mark that was able
His
to
friend.
make arrangement, his friend Mark in Mountain Home, that was able to get these books, a lot of them, I guess, sent over to Dylan. I don't know the volume, I don't know how many of them are in it, but that was a wonderful thing that they could preserve those in his family.
So they're in Mountain Home over the years. No big surprise, Bruce's health started to decline. It seems to me like, wasn't diabetes one of the first things that happened? Or
he never recognized diabetes as a real problem.
Okay.
That's something that, you just don't pay any attention to. It'll be all right, but anyone who's diabetic, quite often they're going to end up with heart disease. And he eventually had a heart attack. Well, I wish I could remember the year, kind of nail this down. But he almost died. And they got him to the hospital in Mountain Home and got him stabilized and transferred him to Barnes Hospital in St. Louis. And we got contacted through someone, possibly Helia, I don't know, but someone says Bruce has had a heart attack and he's in the hospital. Well, he was in serious shape, and they did bypass surgery on him, which was amazing. He survived through that. He only had about 30% functional heart muscle that left, which really left him depleted. The big problem was eventually it came to the point where it was time for him to get out, but he had nowhere to go. He had no health insurance. He had nothing to fall back on.
So who comes through for him again? Al.
Well, I just couldn't let it happen. And so Nancy and I went to St. Louis, and we picked him up, and we brought him up to our house. And at that time, when he first got there, he's, oh, good, let's, go in the house. And I've got 3 steps that go up into my house from my garage. When we got him home, he was so weak, he got out of the car, but he couldn't, in any stretch of the imagination, make 3 steps into the house. That's how weak he was. So we got him into the house and got him comfortable and got him rested a little bit. And then I started working on him, and because he needed to walk. Well, eventually we got him walking down the 3 steps and out the driveway a little bit and getting some sort of exercise. And he built himself up over the summer until just after Thanksgiving. He was able to talk about going back home and being on his own. So I took him back down to Mountain Home and got him into his house. His parents, in the meantime, his dad passed away first, and Nancy and I went down to that funeral. His mother passed away then much later on. She languished for quite a while in a nursing home. But then Bruce had 2 properties down there. He had his house, plus he had his parents' condominium. And he was living then. He moved into his parents' house. Bruce did not like change. Oh, he did not like change. And when his mother passed away and he moved into that house, he brought personal things down from his house, but nothing got moved in that house. You didn't change things. If that picture has been on that shelf for all these years, you leave it on that shelf. And so, I mean, the idea of dusting or cleaning or furniture polish, that wasn't going to happen. But he somehow or other was able to survive on a diet that I'm sure came mostly from McDonald's and a Mexican restaurant that he really liked, none of which was any good for him. But he was able to exist until September 17th, 2020, almost 2 years to the day from now, right now.
Yes.
And I got the call from Helia that said Mark had called and that he hadn't heard from Bruce for a few days, and he went over and found him dead in bed. And then, thank God, Mark was there, and he had no one else. And Bruce would never even call Mark a friend. He was an associate of some sort. It was really strange. They were so much alike in a lot of regards. I mean, they had nothing to do with computers, nothing to do with cell phones, nothing like that. And so the chances of Mark ever seeing this is probably just almost zero.
Unless we take it by him and
unless I go down there and look him up. But Mark was able to go through his estate and did tremendous favors, and was able to organize
Thank
and talk with lawyers. Couldn't have happened. If it hadn't been for Mark, they would have simply turned the entire thing over to the state, and the state would have done at will.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, they sold both of the condos. There was some equity there that eventually Bruce had an account that they could write a check out of that went to Europe.
Isn't it amazing, though, one thing we haven't touched on exactly is that Bruce and Jill, or Helia, remained married, how many decades? She in Holland,
yeah.
and Bruce in Mountain Home, and they would talk once a week, you told me.
Once a week.
But that's it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, when did they last even see each other? You think?
I can't answer that off the top of. I don't remember. It would have to be when he left Holland, because our Jill and Dylan came over here, and in San Francisco area they went back home, and Bruce came back to the
I mean,
US.
it could have been maybe 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet they remained married.
Yep,
and never saw each other, but they did talk each week.
Yep. So once that settled, then Bruce had his estate settled, and his cremation had taken place, and his remains were being held at the funeral home in Mountain Home, and Mark claimed those and had them in his possession, and that was a year ago in October.
Okay.
Nancy and I were on our way south to Florida for our annual migration, and we went through Mountain Home, and I met with Mark and took him out to dinner, and in a parking lot down there, he handed Bruce's ashes over to me, and I've had them in our possessions for the last year, almost year.
For that long. And then yesterday, which was wonderful,
thank you.
We were there, and you had some great words of wisdom about Bruce, and spread the ashes partly into the air, but partly into the grass there in Rand Park, just beside where the famous house was.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just perfect.
Yeah, perfect. I was so pleased to have the weather, to everything. Even the wind was blowing
the right way.
Had the wind been going the other way, we couldn't have done what we
Not
did.
quite the same way.
No. But as it is, it was just the perfect environment, just the right amount of people. We didn't need a crowd of 25 people there for a celebration of life. This was the people who really, Bruce meant something to them.
Yeah.
And so
I think, the one thing I think about often is what might have been if Bruce could have taken better care of himself with that much intensity and that wonderful soul voice. What could have happened, and how far it could have gone. But this is not an unusual story. He's an unusual guy, but it's not an unusual ending, really.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say goodbye to him. It really is. I mean, you go through different stages after you find out that someone you know and have loved it's gone. It takes time, and
It does.
I still think about him a lot. I
do
really
too.
do. Things will come to mind every week. I'll guarantee this. When I take regular medicines morning and evening, that's just part of being 74 years old, and so I have my pill planner. Well, I went down to help Bruce get himself, situated, and then brought up to our house.
I can see.
And of course, they had medication. They had these little pill things, and I said, "Okay, Bruce, you need to put your pills in here for morning and evening for the following week." Okay, and so Bruce, again, just things didn't quite fit together. So Bruce he would take a bottle of pills, and he would open the pill, and he would get a pill out. He would open the lid for Sunday, and he'd put the pill in, and he'd shut it. And then he'd get another pill, and he'd come over, and he'd open up the lid, and he'd put a pill in for Monday. And so on and so forth. I'm not kidding you. I said, Bruce, no, there's easier ways to do this. And every weekend, I swear there hasn't been one that I've missed. I think about Bruce and his logic when it comes to putting those pills in that pill dispenser.
Wow. Well, and Bruce, we'll never forget you. We love you.
Yeah.
It breaks us up sometimes, but you were the best. You were the greatest. And our most unforgettable character.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Remember Mary and her funny family. We used to laugh and criticize her features at every opportunity. Mary's coming home today. She's been away so long. She's very pretty now, so they say. But I've gotta get away, 'cause I know that I treated her wrong. Remember Mary and her weather-beaten home, a purple dress and a plastic ring were the only thing she owned. She didn't have any friends that cared, and when we pulled her hair, she'd have to cry alone. Mary's coming home today. She's been away so long. Yeah, she's very pretty now, so they say. But I've gotta get away, 'cause I know that I treated her wrong. And do you remember the day that Mary ran away? After that we changed our ways, but by then it was too late. No one's ever seen her since, but I heard